Hi there. If you're reading this, I want you to know that what you're about to dive into isn't just another family drama story. It's raw, it's real, and trust me, it's messy in the best way possible. But before we get into all of that, let me introduce myself. My name is Clara Evershade and I'm an artist. Well, technically I'm trying to be one. Right now, though, I'm sitting in my tiny studio apartment on a chilly October evening, staring at a blank canvas while my mind races with thoughts I can't quite silence. You see, life hasn't exactly been kind to me, at least not compared to my younger sister, Seraphina, or Sera as everyone calls her. She's the golden child, the one who lights up every room she walks into. Me. I'm more like the shadow lurking in the corner, hoping no one notices how much I don't belong. Tonight I'm trying to distract myself from the ache in my chest by painting something, anything, but even my brushes feel heavy tonight. Why? Because tomorrow my parents are throwing Sera the wedding of the century. A $50,000 extravaganza at Willowmere Estate, complete with imported flowers, a live orchestra and enough caviar to feed a small village. Meanwhile, when I had my first art exhibition last year, they couldn't even show up because they were too busy attending one of Sera's piano recitals. Yeah, you read that right. So if you're curious about how this story unfolds, and let's be honest, you should be, I'd love for you to stick around until the end. Hit subscribe, bookmark this page, whatever works for you. Just promise me you'll stay till the final brushstroke. Now let's get started. The next morning I found myself standing outside our family home, a grand colonial-style mansion tucked away in the rolling hills of upstate New York. It's beautiful, sure, but it's never felt like home to me. Not really. I wasn't planning to visit today, but Mom texted me asking me to drop off some old books she wanted to donate. Of course, she didn't ask nicely. It was more of a demand disguised as a favor. As I walked through the front door, the scent of lavender candles hit me immediately. Lavender was always Mom's signature move, a subtle reminder that perfection was expected here. I overheard her voice drifting from the dining room, where she sat with Dad going over the wedding plans. "We simply must upgrade the floral arrangements," she said, her tone clipped. "White roses are fine, but peonies would make such a statement." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Seriously? We're talking tens of thousands of dollars on flowers, and yet my entire college tuition came with strings attached. I placed the box of books on the counter and cleared my throat loudly, hoping to announce my presence without interrupting their important conversation. No luck. They barely glanced at me before returning to their discussion. Standing there, invisible and insignificant, I realized something. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about years of feeling unseen, unheard, and unloved. And honestly, I was tired of it. Back in my apartment later that day, I leaned against the doorframe of my studio, staring at the half-finished paintings scattered around the room. Each one told a piece of my story. A lonely childhood spent hiding in libraries, late nights sketching under the covers with a flashlight, and endless dreams of creating something meaningful. But then there were the other memories too, the ones I tried to bury deep inside. Like the time Sera won first place in a statewide piano competition, and Mom cried tears of joy while barely acknowledging my second-place finish in an art contest. Or the summer I painted a mural on the basement wall, only for Dad to paint over it because it didn't match the aesthetic. Despite everything, though, I couldn't hate my sister. Not completely. There were moments when she stood up for me, defending me from bullies or sneaking me cookies after bedtime. Those memories lingered like faint pencil marks beneath layers of paint, still there even if you couldn't see them clearly. Maybe that's why, despite the resentment bubbling inside me, I knew I'd go to her wedding. I owed her that much, didn't I? After all, she wasn't the one ignoring me. She wasn't the one spending thousands on her big day while pretending I didn't exist. That honor belonged solely to my parents. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to make this wedding unforgettable. For both of us. A few days later, the invitation arrived. It wasn't just any invitation. It was embossed gold lettering on thick ivory cardstock, tied with a satin ribbon the color of champagne. On the surface, it looked elegant, refined, the kind of thing people would pin to Pinterest boards. But when I opened it, my stomach sank. Inside was a note from Mom reminding everyone to dress appropriately and contribute generously to the gift registry. No heartfelt message, no personal touch. Just a checklist of expectations. I stared at the envelope for a long time, tracing the edges with my fingertips. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash and pretend it never existed. Another part, the stubborn, creative part, started thinking about what I could do instead. What if I gave Sera something money couldn't buy? Something that came straight from my heart. The idea excited me, but it also terrified me. Could I pull it off? Would anyone even care? I didn't have answers yet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this wedding pass without leaving my mark. That night I called Cale Draven my best friend since forever. He's the kind of guy who radiates calmness, even when your world feels like it's falling apart. We met in college. He was studying music, I was drowning in art classes, and somehow we clicked instantly. These days he runs a cozy little cafe downtown called Draven's Den, where locals gather to sip coffee and listen to his acoustic performances. "Hey stranger," he answered, his voice warm and familiar. "What's got you calling at this hour?" "I need advice," I admitted, pacing back and forth in my living room. "Sera's wedding is coming up and I don't want to give her something boring from the registry. I want it to mean something." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Cale chuckled softly. "Well, that's easy. Make her something. You're an artist, Clara. Use your gift." His words struck a chord deep within me. Of course, that's exactly what I should do. But what? A painting? A sculpture? Something else entirely? I thanked him for the pep talk and hung up, my mind buzzing with possibilities. For the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this whole mess into something beautiful. The next morning I decided to visit Willowmere Estate under the guise of helping with wedding preparations. Truthfully, I just needed to see the place for myself, to understand the stage where this grand spectacle would unfold. As I drove up the winding driveway, the mansion came into view, its ivy-covered stone walls glowing softly in the autumn sunlight. It was breathtaking, yes, but also intimidating. How could anything I created possibly hold its own against such opulence? Inside, chaos reigned. Florists bustled around with armfuls of white roses, soon to be replaced by peonies apparently. Caterers shouted orders in the kitchen, and Mom stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, barking instructions like a drill sergeant. I slipped away unnoticed, wandering through the gardens until I stumbled upon Sera sitting alone on a bench near the pond. She looked exhausted, her usual sparkle dimmed by stress. "I didn't expect to find you here," I said, sitting down beside her. She sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "Neither did I. But Mom insisted I come to approve the final details." "Does she ever stop?" I asked, half joking. Sera gave me a weary smile. "Not unless someone tells her to." We sat in silence for a moment, watching the leaves drift lazily across the water. For the first time in years, it felt like we were kids again, just two sisters sharing a quiet moment without judgment or competition. And then it hit me, whatever I made for Sera, it had to capture this feeling. This fleeting sense of peace amidst the storm. Back in my studio that night, inspiration struck like lightning. I grabbed my sketchpad and began drawing furiously, letting the images flow from my mind onto the page. The mural would depict Sera as a child, surrounded by the whimsical worlds she used to dream about. A castle in the clouds, a forest filled with talking animals, a starry sky that stretched endlessly above her. It would be vibrant, magical, and deeply personal, a tribute to the sister who once believed in magic even when the rest of us forgot how. Hours turned into days as I worked tirelessly, losing track of time and sleep. My hands ached, my back screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. Every stroke of the brush brought me closer to something bigger than myself. A chance to prove that art isn't just decoration, it's connection. Still doubts crept in. What if Sera hated it? What if Mom dismissed it as childish nonsense? I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the joy I hoped it would bring. By the time the mural was finished, it wasn't just a gift for Sera anymore. It was a declaration of my love, my creativity, and my refusal to be invisible. With the wedding only a week away, tensions at home reached a fever pitch. Mom called daily, updating me on every minor detail, from the color of the napkins to the placement of the guest book. Each conversation ended the same way, "And don't forget to buy something nice from the registry." Her tone left no room for argument, but I ignored her demands, knowing my gift would speak louder than any overpriced china set ever could. Then came the inevitable confrontation. One evening, after another marathon painting session, I answered the phone to hear Mom's sharp voice cutting through the line. "Clara, I heard you haven't purchased anything for Sera yet. Is that true? Yes, I replied evenly, bracing myself for the backlash. There was a pause followed by an icy laugh. Unbelievable. Everyone else is pulling their weight, but of course you have to make things difficult. Her words stung, but I refused to let them break me. It's not about making things difficult, Mom. It's about giving her something meaningful. Something real. Meaningful doesn't pay the bills, Clara, she snapped before hanging up. I stared at the phone, anger bubbling inside me. For so long I'd let her criticisms define me, but not anymore. This time I wouldn't back down. Not for her. Not for anyone. A few days later, Sera surprised me with a call. Her voice was hesitant, almost shy, which was unusual for her. Hey Clara, can we talk? Sure, I said, sinking onto the couch. What's up? She hesitated before speaking. I know things haven't been great between us lately. And I know Mom hasn't exactly been supportive of your art. But I wanted to say thank you, for always being there even when I wasn't. Tears welled in my eyes as I listened to her words. For so long, I'd convinced myself that she didn't care, that she was just another part of the machine that kept grinding me down. But hearing her now, I realized how wrong I'd been. I'm proud of you, Sera, I told her honestly. And I promise your wedding day is going to be unforgettable, for all the right reasons. She laughed softly. You're not planning anything crazy, are you? You'll just have to wait and see. The night before the wedding, disaster struck. I enlisted Cale's help to transport the mural to Willowmere Estate, carefully wrapping it in protective sheets and securing it in the back of his van. Everything seemed fine until we hit a pothole on the dark country road. The van jolted violently, sending the mural sliding forward. When we stopped to inspect the damage, my heart sank. A corner of the canvas had torn, exposing raw wood beneath. No, no, no. I cried, panic rising in my chest. This can't be happening. Cale placed a calming hand on my shoulder. Breathe, Clara. We can fix this. Let's get it inside and assess the situation. For the next 3 hours, we worked frantically, patching the tear with fabric glue and repainting the damaged section by lamplight. My hands trembled with exhaustion, but I refused to give up. This mural wasn't just a project. It was my soul poured onto canvas. By the time we finished, dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting golden light across the repaired masterpiece. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. And that was enough. On the morning of the wedding, I arrived at Willowmere Estate early, carrying the mural wrapped in fresh linen. The venue buzzed with activity as vendors scrambled to put the finishing touches on decorations. I found a quiet corner to set up the mural, positioning it so it would catch the natural light streaming through the windows. As guests began arriving, I watched from afar, nerves twisting in my stomach. Would they notice? Would they care? More importantly, would Sera understand the depth of what I was trying to say? Mom flitted around like a hummingbird on caffeine, critiquing everything from the table settings to the DJ's playlist. Meanwhile, Dad stood silently in the background, sipping whiskey and avoiding eye contact. When Sera finally appeared, dressed in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, I felt a lump rise in my throat. She looked radiant, yes, but also fragile, like a porcelain doll teetering on the edge of a shelf. Whatever happened today, I vowed to make sure she knew she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The ceremony began under a canopy of golden leaves, the autumn air crisp and fragrant with the scent of fallen foliage. Sera walked down the aisle on Dad's arm, her dress trailing elegantly behind her like a whisper of silk against the earth. She looked every bit the fairy tale princess our mother had always envisioned, graceful, poised, untouchable. But as I watched from my seat in the back row, I noticed something else too. The way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet, the faint tension in her smile. Beneath the perfection, she was holding on by a thread. Mom sat front and center, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief while Dad stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Cale, who'd managed to snag a seat near me, leaned over and whispered, "You ready for this?" I nodded, though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings, applause and tears. When it was over, Sera kissed her new husband, Evan Hartley, a kind-hearted guy who clearly adored her, and turned to face the crowd. Her gaze swept across the room, lingering briefly on me before moving on. As everyone filed into the reception hall, I stayed behind for a moment, taking a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back now. The reception was everything Mom had dreamed of, and more. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables adorned with peonies, of course, and the live orchestra played soft melodies that floated through the air like smoke. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and marveling at the extravagance. It was also perfect. Too perfect. Then came Mom's speech. She stood at the microphone, glass in hand, beaming like the proud architect of this masterpiece. "Today is a celebration of love," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "But it's also a celebration of family, tradition, and the pursuit of excellence." She went on to list Sera's accomplishments, each word dripping with pride and money. By the time she finished, I could practically hear the collective eye roll of the younger guests. When she stepped away from the mic, I saw my chance. My palms were slick with sweat as I approached the stage, but I forced myself to keep walking. As I took the microphone, a hush fell over the room. Everyone turned to look at me, some curious, others annoyed. "I know this isn't my day," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "But I wanted to take a moment to honor someone very special to me, my sister, Sera." With a nod to Kale, who stood nearby, I gestured toward the mural hidden beneath a velvet curtain. "Sera has always been the light in our family," I continued, my voice steadying as I spoke. "And today I wanted to give her something that captures not just who she is now but who she was. A dreamer, a believer, a girl who saw magic in the world when the rest of us forgot how." Kale pulled the curtain away, revealing the mural in all its glory. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they took in the vibrant scene. A young Sera standing in a castle made of clouds, surrounded by talking animals and a sky filled with shooting stars. It was whimsical yet deeply personal, a testament to the bond we once shared. Sera froze, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. For a moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then she whispered, barely audible but clear enough for those closest to hear, "Clara." I stepped down from the stage and walked toward her, my own eyes brimming with tears. "I painted this because I wanted you to remember," I said softly so only she could hear. "Remember the days when we used to build forts out of blankets and pretend we were explorers. Remember how you always defended me even when I didn't deserve it. And remember that no matter what happens you'll always have someone who loves you, not for what you achieve but for who you are." Her arms wrapped around me in a tight embrace, pulling me close as she sobbed quietly. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget this." Some guests applauded, moved by the sincerity of the moment. Others exchanged whispers, criticizing me for upstaging the bride. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was the look in Sera's eyes, a mix of gratitude, joy, and relief. For the first time in years I felt like I'd done something truly worthwhile. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with my little display. Mom stormed over as soon as the initial shock wore off, her face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing, Clara?" she hissed, grabbing my arm and dragging me aside. "This is Sera's day, not yours." "It's called giving a gift, Mom," I shot back, yanking my arm free. "Something you wouldn't understand since you've spent your life treating people like transactions." Her jaw tightened and for a second I thought she might slap me. Instead she turned to Dad, expecting him to intervene. But he just stood there looking uncomfortable as usual. "You're ruining everything," Mom spat before storming off, leaving me fuming. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Mom confronted me again. This time she wasn't alone. Dad was with her, though he still refused to meet my gaze. "How dare you embarrass us like that?" Mom demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea how much we've sacrificed for this family? For you?" I laughed bitterly. "Sacrificed? You mean ignored? Neglected? Spent thousands on Sera's wedding while acting like I don't exist? Yeah, thanks for that." For once Mom didn't have a comeback. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, glaring at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Dad finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. Maybe we should listen to her." Mom's head snapped toward him, disbelief etched across her face. "Are you serious right now?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "She's our daughter, Lysandra. Maybe it's time we treated her like one." The next morning, I woke up exhausted but strangely lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. Sera texted me early, asking if we could meet for coffee. We ended up at Kale's cafe, sitting in a cozy corner booth as steam curled lazily from our mugs. "I'm sorry," she said after a long silence, "for letting things get so bad between us. I should have stood up to Mom more." "It's not your fault," I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "We both got caught up in their expectations. But maybe we can change that now." She smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Deal." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my art, channeling the emotions from the wedding into new pieces. Word spread about the mural, and soon local galleries began reaching out, eager to showcase my work. It was surreal, honestly. After years of feeling invisible, people were finally seeing me. One afternoon, as I prepped for my first solo exhibition, Kale stopped by the studio. "You've come a long way, Clara," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Proud of you." "Thanks," I replied, smiling. "Couldn't have done it without you." A few months later, Mom and Dad invited me to dinner. They were awkward and overly polite, which immediately set off alarm bells. Still, I agreed to go, curious about what they wanted. "We owe you an apology," Mom said haltingly, twisting her napkin in her lap. "We haven't been fair to you and, well, we're trying to do better." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I nodded, accepting their words cautiously. Forgiveness wouldn't come overnight, but maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. The night of my first solo art exhibition arrived, and I found myself pacing nervously in the gallery's back room. My stomach churned with a mix of excitement and dread. What if no one showed up? What if they hated my work? Kale had been helping me set up all day, arranging paintings on easels and adjusting lighting to highlight each piece. He'd promised it would be a night to remember. But promises don't always hold weight when you're staring down the barrel of your biggest fear. "You ready?" Kale asked, poking his head into the small prep area where I was hiding. "No," I admitted, tugging at the hem of my dress, a sleek black number Sera had insisted I wear. "What if this is a disaster?" "It's not going to be a disaster," he said firmly, pulling me toward the doorway. "Now go out there and let people see what you've got." When I stepped into the main gallery, my breath caught. The space was packed, friends, strangers, even a few local art critics mingling among the crowd. And then I saw her, Sera, standing near the mural that had started it all, wearing a delicate bracelet I'd given her as a token of our renewed bond. She caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up, mouthing, "You've got this." For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. As the evening wore on, I drifted through the gallery, shaking hands and answering questions about my work. People seemed genuinely moved by the pieces, especially the mural, which remained the centerpiece of the exhibition. One woman, a curator from a larger gallery in Manhattan, even approached me with an offer to showcase my work in an upcoming show. "This is incredible," she said, gesturing to the mural. "It tells such a personal story, yet it feels universal. You have something special here." Her words stayed with me long after she left, echoing in my mind like a melody I couldn't shake. For so long I doubted whether my art mattered, whether anyone would care. But tonight proved otherwise. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Sera joined me near the mural. "You did it," she said, looping her arm through mine. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," I replied, leaning my head against hers. "I couldn't have done it without you." Weeks later, sitting alone in my studio, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since Sera's wedding. That single act of defiance, choosing to create rather than conform, had changed my life in ways I never expected. I'd gained confidence, recognition, and most importantly, a deeper connection with my sister. But the road ahead wasn't perfect. Mom and Dad were still struggling to adjust, their attempts at reconciliation often clumsy and forced. Still, I chose to focus on the progress, however small. Healing takes time, and I was willing to give them, and myself, that grace. I picked up my brush and began sketching again, letting my thoughts flow onto the canvas. Each stroke reminded me of how far I'd come and how much further I wanted to go. One afternoon, while sorting through old sketches, I stumbled upon a notebook from my teenage years. Its pages were filled with self-doubt and longing, scrawled notes about wanting to be noticed, to matter. Reading it now, I realized how much I'd grown. Back then, I'd defined my worth based on other people's approval. Now I knew better. My value didn't depend on my parents' validation or society's expectations. It came from within, from the courage to create, to speak my truth, and to stand firm in who I was. Art had taught me that. Sera had reminded me of it. And Kale had cheered me on every step of the way. I closed the notebook and tucked it away, smiling softly. Those old fears didn't control me anymore. Months turned into years and life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. My career blossomed. I landed commissions, collaborated with other artists, and even published a book of essays about finding creativity in chaos. Sera and I grew closer than ever, sharing late-night phone calls and weekend getaways. Our relationship became a safe haven, a reminder that family isn't just blood, it's choice. As for Mom and Dad, things remained complicated. They weren't perfect and neither was I. But we were learning to listen, to apologize, to forgive. Sometimes love looks like grand gestures, but more often, it's the quiet moments of effort that count. On a crisp autumn morning years after that fateful wedding, I sat by the window of my new studio, watching the sun rise over the hills. My easel stood nearby, a fresh canvas waiting for its first marks. I picked up my brush and smiled. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face them. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself, not to the world. And that made all the difference.